The glass was supposed to kill her. Instead, it ended up buried in the stomach of one of Seoul's most powerful lawyers. Blood spread across the apartment floor in slow red streams. A shattered wine glass lay between three people whose lives would never look the same again. Kang Min-jun pressed a trembling hand against his stomach. His white shirt darkened by the second. Across from him, Han Seo-yeon stood frozen, staring at the broken glass still clutched in her fingers. A few feet away, Amara Okafor could not move at all. Her chest felt tight. Her heart slammed against her ribs. None of this made sense. One woman was heading toward prison. One woman was about to lose the future she had spent years rebuilding. And the man kneeling between them was the reason both of them had been willing to risk everything. But none of this started in Seoul. It started thousands of miles away in Lagos. Before we continue, welcome to the Storytelling Desk YouTube channel, where love collides with loyalty, betrayal cuts deep, and every choice carries weight. If stories like this are your kind of journey, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Now let's begin. 3 years earlier, Amara stood inside a crowded courtroom in Lagos, Nigeria, listening to a judge deliver a decision that changed the direction of her life. She had once been considered one of the brightest young lawyers in the city. She was sharp, ambitious, and stubborn enough to challenge people twice her age. Clients trusted her. Colleagues respected her. Then one case destroyed everything. A wealthy businessman faced life imprisonment. During the investigation, evidence surfaced that should have ended his defense immediately. Amara convinced herself that the evidence had been mishandled. She convinced herself she was protecting due process. She convinced herself she was doing the right thing. She was wrong. Months later, the truth emerged. Critical evidence had been concealed. The businessman eventually went to prison, but Amara's role in the case was exposed. She was stripped of the career she loved and publicly humiliated. The punishment could have ended her story. Instead, it became the beginning of a different one. Most people expected her to disappear. She bought a plane ticket. When she arrived in Seoul, she carried 2 suitcases, a law degree, and a belief she refused to let die. She believed justice could still mean something. At least she hoped it could. The city welcomed her with cold mornings, crowded trains, and rejection after rejection. Law firms glanced at her credentials and politely turned her away. Some never called back. Others explained that their hiring standards favored graduates from elite international universities. Her Nigerian degree impressed nobody. The realization hit hard. The law she had spent years studying could not open the doors she wanted. For weeks, she walked through Seoul carrying copies of her resume while quietly calculating how much money remained in her account. Every rejection tightened the knot in her stomach. One rainy afternoon, she sat beneath a bus stop shelter and stared at her phone. A message appeared. A prestigious law firm was offering her a position, not as a lawyer, as a paralegal. The pay was lower than she wanted. The position was far below her qualifications. She accepted within 5 minutes. Failure had already taken enough from her. She was not going to surrender the rest. The law firm occupied several floors of a glass tower overlooking the city. Everything about the place felt intimidating. The employees moved with confidence. The attorney spoke with precision. The expectations were relentless. Amara threw herself into the work immediately. If a filing needed preparation, she volunteered. If a deposition required organization, she stayed late. If documents needed reviewing, she took them home. She worked harder than anyone around her because she had something to prove. Not to the firm, to herself. 6 months later, she enrolled in a Korean law program, using nearly every extra one she earned. Tuition drained her savings. Rent drained what remained. The only solution was more work. So she started taking every overtime assignment available. Morning became afternoon. Afternoon became night. Night often became morning again. Most employees eventually went home. Amara usually remained. One afternoon, she rushed out of a deposition room, carrying 3 folders against her chest. She had another meeting waiting, and another after that. As she stepped into the hallway, a voice stopped her. "Excuse me." She turned. Kang Min-jun stood several feet away, managing partner, name partner, one of the most respected lawyers in Seoul. Amara straightened immediately. "Yes, sir?" Min-jun studied her for a moment, not her paperwork. Her. "What is your name?" "Amara Okafor." "Nigeria?" "Yes." He nodded once, then his eyes shifted toward the folders she carried. "You've been working extra assignments for months." "Yes, sir." "Why?" The question caught her off guard. For a second, she considered giving a professional answer. Instead, she told the truth. "I'm paying for law school." Min-jun remained silent. "So you're doing all this for tuition?" "Most of it." "And if it becomes too much?" Amara felt a flash of irritation. She respected concern. She hated being underestimated. Her expression almost betrayed it. Almost. She forced herself to stay calm. "It's fine, sir," she said. "I know what I'm signing up for." Min-jun watched her for another second. Then he nodded. "Very well." He stepped aside. Amara continued down the hallway. Yet for reasons she couldn't explain, she felt his eyes following her long after she disappeared around the corner. That night, while organizing exhibits in a nearly empty records room, Amara tried to forget the conversation. She told herself he was simply being polite. Managers asked questions. Managers noticed employees. There was nothing unusual about that. Yet when she finally looked up at the clock and saw midnight approaching, she caught herself thinking about his expression again. It wasn't curiosity alone. It seemed closer to recognition than expected somehow. The next evening, the office was quieter than usual. Most of the attorneys had already left. The cleaning staff moved between rows of empty desks. Outside, Seoul glowed beneath a blanket of city lights. Amara rubbed her eyes and glanced at the clock. 11:07 p.m. She still had 3 case files left to organize before she could go home. Her fingers moved across the keyboard mechanically. Open file. Review notes. Save. Repeat. By now the routine felt automatic. That was why she didn't notice the figure standing outside her office until a knock sounded against the glass. She looked up. Min-jun. For a second she wondered if something was wrong. Managing partners didn't wander around checking on paralegals at 11 o'clock at night. She stood immediately. "Sir." He stepped inside. Unlike most senior lawyers, he never carried himself like he owned the room. He simply entered it, and somehow everyone adjusted around him. "You should sit," he said. Amara sat again. Min-jun glanced at the files stacked across her desk. "Still working?" She almost laughed. "Clearly." The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Not quite a smile. Not quite serious either. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he asked, "Do you always stay this late?" Amara looked at the clock. "I usually leave earlier than this." That wasn't an answer. She sighed. "Most nights, yes." His eyes drifted across the office. Every light was off except hers. Every desk was empty except hers. The silence answered for her. Min-jun slipped his hands into his pockets. "You know, people aren't promoted for sleeping in the office." "I wasn't trying to get promoted." "No? No. What are you trying to get?" The question landed differently than she expected. Not judgment, curiosity, real curiosity. Amara leaned back slightly. A second chance. The answer surprised both of them. Min-jun's expression didn't change, but she noticed his attention sharpen. A second chance at what? She hesitated. Most people in the office didn't know her history, and she preferred it that way. "My career." His gaze remained steady. "That's a heavy thing to chase." "I know. Yet you're still chasing it." Amara nodded. "What choice do I have?" Min-jun looked away toward the city skyline beyond the glass windows. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "More choices than most people think." Before she could respond, he checked his watch. Then he looked back at her. "Are you almost finished?" "About 10 minutes." "Good." She frowned. "Good?" "I'll wait." That caught her completely off guard. "Wait for what?" "To drive you home." The room went silent. Amara blinked. Surely she had misunderstood. "I'm sorry. I said I'll drive you home." "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Min-jun looked mildly amused. "Because it's late. I can take the train." "The train stopped running 40 minutes ago." She opened her mouth. Closed it. He was right. She hated when people were right. "It's not necessary." "I didn't say it was." "Then why?" For the first time that evening, he seemed unsure how to answer. The hesitation lasted only a second, but she noticed it. Finally he shrugged. "Because you're an employee." The answer felt incomplete, like half a sentence, like there was something else behind it. Amara couldn't identify what. She also couldn't prove it existed, so she let it go. 10 minutes later she shut down her computer. Neither of them mentioned the conversation again. The elevator ride felt strangely quiet, not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. When they reached the underground parking garage, Min-jun unlocked a black sedan. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth. The car looked practical, purposeful, like its owner. The drive began in silence. Streetlights passed overhead. Reflections slid across the windshield. Amara watched the city move outside her window. Min-jun focused on the road. Several minutes passed. Then he finally spoke. "Why Seoul?" She already knew that question was coming. She just didn't know when. Because I wanted to practice law somewhere that respected it. His fingers tightened slightly on the steering wheel. What does that mean? She stared ahead, trying to find the right words. In Nigeria, I spent years watching powerful people escape consequences. A pause. I got tired of it. And you thought Seoul would be different? I hoped it would. Hoped? She smiled faintly. I've learned hope and reality don't always work together. A quiet laugh escaped him, short, unexpected. Amara turned toward him immediately. There it was again. That laugh, the same one from before. Not mocking, not cruel, yet somehow connected to something she didn't understand. What? Min-jun glanced at her. What? You laughed. Did I? Yes. Then it must have been funny. She narrowed her eyes. It wasn't. No. It really wasn't. Min-jun looked back at the road. His smile disappeared. You're right. The answer raised even more questions. Amara folded her arms. You know something. About what? About me. He didn't answer. The silence lasted long enough to become an answer itself. Her heartbeat quickened. What do you know? Still nothing. Then finally, more than you think. Amara stared at him. What does that mean? It means I do my homework. On employees? On people. The response frustrated her. Not because it was rude, because it wasn't. Because it sounded completely reasonable. And yet she couldn't shake the feeling that he was talking around something. The car eventually pulled into her apartment complex. Amara looked outside, then looked back at him. How do you know where I live? Min-jun raised an eyebrow. You submitted your address when you were hired. People actually read those forms? Some of us do. For the first time that evening, she laughed. A genuine laugh. It caught both of them by surprise. When it faded, an unfamiliar warmth settled inside the car. Neither seemed eager to disturb it. Eventually, Amara reached for the door handle. Thank you for the ride. Min-jun nodded. Then, just before she stepped out, he said something that made her pause. I wish you luck. She turned back. With what? His eyes held hers for a second longer than necessary. Becoming a lawyer again. The words hit harder than she expected, because buried inside them was something she hadn't heard in years. Belief, not certainty, not pity. Belief. Amara swallowed. Thank you. Then she stepped out of the car and watched the taillights disappear into the night. Hours later, she lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to understand why his laugh bothered her, trying to understand why his words mattered, trying to understand why she felt like Kang Min-jun knew parts of her story she had never told him. And somewhere across Seoul, Min-jun sat alone in his apartment, staring at a file. On the cover was a name, Amara Okafor. And for the first time in a very long time, he wondered if bringing her into the firm had been the right decision, or the most dangerous one. Amara barely slept. By the time her alarm rang, she had spent most of the night replaying every word from the car ride. She told herself she was overthinking. People did that when they were tired, especially people who worked too much. Still, the feeling refused to leave. Min-jun knew something. She just didn't know what. The next morning, Seoul greeted her with cold air and crowded sidewalks. She arrived at the office 10 minutes early as usual. The lobby buzzed with movement. Employees hurried toward elevators. Phones rang. Conversations overlapped. Everything looked normal. Until she saw him. Min-jun stepped through the revolving doors at the exact moment she reached the reception area. Their eyes met. Just for a few seconds. 3 at most. Neither smiled. Neither looked away immediately. Yet something passed between them. Not familiarity, not attraction. Recognition. The kind that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. Then Min-jun broke eye contact first. He adjusted his jacket and continued toward the elevators, as if nothing had happened. Amara stood there another second before forcing herself to move. Get a grip, she muttered. The elevator doors closed behind her. She spent the ride convincing herself she was imagining things. By the time she reached her office, she almost believed it. Then she opened her daily schedule and froze. Her eyes scanned the page twice, then a third time. There had to be a mistake. Every assignment listed for that day involved only one attorney, Kang Min-jun. She checked the next day's schedule. Same thing. The day after that. Again. The entire week. Every assignment, every deposition, every preparation meeting, every document review. Attached exclusively to him. Amara stared at the screen. What? A colleague passing her office glanced inside. You okay? She quickly minimized the schedule. Fine. The colleague shrugged and continued walking. Amara looked back at the monitor. The assignments hadn't changed. Neither had her confusion. 1 hour later, she entered a conference room carrying 2 folders and a tablet. Several clients already sat around the table. Defense attorneys occupied one side. Opposing counsel occupied the other. At the head of the room sat Min-jun. He didn't acknowledge her arrival. Not because he was rude, because the meeting had already started. The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Amara had worked with talented attorneys before. Many talented attorneys. But this felt different. Min-jun wasn't reacting to the room. He was controlling it. Every question landed precisely where he wanted. Every response forced a specific outcome. Every attempt by opposing counsel to redirect the conversation collapsed before it gained momentum. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't intimidation. It was preparation. Pure preparation. Hours of it. Days of it. Maybe weeks. Halfway through the deposition, Amara noticed something remarkable. Min-jun wasn't merely listening. He seemed to anticipate answers before they arrived. A witness would hesitate. Min-jun already knew why. An attorney would object. He already had a response prepared. Someone would attempt a strategic diversion. He dismantled it before it fully formed. For the first time since arriving in Seoul, Amara forgot to take notes for nearly 10 seconds. She simply watched. The realization hit her slowly. This is why he's the managing partner. Not politics, not luck, not connections. Competence. Relentless competence. The deposition ended 3 hours later. People gathered their belongings. Chairs scraped against the floor. Conversations resumed. Most participants left quickly. Amara remained seated, not intentionally. Her mind was still processing everything she had witnessed. When she finally stood, she realized the room was nearly empty. Only one other person remained. Min-jun. He closed a folder and looked up. For a second, neither spoke. Then he said, "You were impressed." It wasn't a question. Amara laughed softly. Was it that obvious? Very. She considered denying it. Pointless. Yes, she admitted. I was. Min-jun leaned back slightly. What impressed you? The preparation. His expression remained neutral. Only the preparation? She paused. No. What else? The discipline. Something flickered behind his eyes. Gone almost instantly, but present. You sound disappointed. I am. That answer surprised him. Amara continued before she could lose her nerve. I was hoping there was some secret. A secret. Some trick. Min-jun almost smiled. There isn't. There has to be. There isn't. You make it look easy. It isn't. His answer arrived immediately, without hesitation, without pride, just fact. The honesty caught her off guard. Min-jun closed the final folder. When people see results, they usually ignore the years that created them. Amara listened quietly. I wasn't born knowing how to do this, he continued. I failed. Repeatedly. Hard to imagine. That's because you're only seeing the finished version. The word stayed with her. Finished version. She wondered what his unfinished version had looked like. Then she remembered herself. A lawyer. Then a disgrace. Then a paralegal. Now a student again. Maybe everyone was an unfinished version of themselves. The thought lingered longer than she expected. Min-jun stood. So? I'll see you at the next deposition. And just like that, he walked out, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The pattern continued for weeks. Every day she worked beside him. Every day she learned something new. Not through lectures, not through mentorship, observation. The most effective lessons often came from watching. Soon people around the office started noticing. One associate joked that Amara spent more time with Min-jun than his actual legal team. Another called her his unofficial shadow. She laughed along with everyone else. Yet privately, she understood something they didn't. Working beside him was changing her. Not emotionally. Professionally. She found herself thinking differently, preparing differently, questioning differently. And that terrified her almost as much as it inspired her. Because admiration was dangerous. Admiration could become dependence. Dependence could become blindness. She promised herself she would never allow that. Then the end of the month arrived, and everything became far more complicated. The salary notification appeared on her phone shortly after lunch. Amara glanced at it absent-mindedly, then stopped walking, looked again, and nearly dropped her phone. Her eyes widened. No way. She checked the number a second time, then a third. The amount was impossible. Absolutely impossible. Even with every overtime assignment she had completed, the total made no sense. She rushed into her office and sat down, heart pounding, mind racing. There had to be an error. Finance had accidentally transferred someone else's salary. That had to be it. Nothing else explained it. Then another possibility surfaced, and she immediately knew. Min-jun. The realization hit so hard she stood up instantly. A minute later she was marching toward his office, questions colliding inside her head. Why? How? For what reason? She reached his door, took a breath, knocked once, and stepped inside. Min-jun looked up from his desk before she could speak. Then, as if he already knew exactly why she was there, he said, "You're wondering about your salary." Amara stopped. Every prepared sentence vanished. And somehow that made her even more nervous. Amara stood in the doorway, still holding her phone. For a moment she simply stared at him. Then she held up the salary notification. This has to be a mistake. Min-jun glanced at the screen. It isn't. The answer came so quickly that her stomach dropped. It isn't? She repeated. No. Amara stepped farther into the office. Then why is the amount 5 times higher than normal? Min-jun leaned back in his chair. The large windows behind him framed the Seoul skyline. Unlike her, he appeared completely calm, as if this conversation had already happened in his head. You earned it. She blinked. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. Sir, I know how much I work. So do I. The room fell silent. Amara lowered the phone. I don't understand. Min-jun folded his hands together. Most people here complete what they're assigned. She waited. You complete what you're assigned, then volunteer for more. She remained quiet. You attend classes. A pause. You study at night. Another pause. You still show up before everyone else. Amara felt herself becoming uncomfortable. Compliments had always been harder to accept than criticism. Criticism made sense. This didn't. That's just work. No. His voice remained calm. It's not. For some reason, those 3 words hit harder than everything else. Min-jun opened a drawer, pulled out a document, set it on the desk. You know how many people asked for your position before you were hired? Amara shook her head. No. Over 300. Her eyebrows lifted. Min-jun nodded. And yet, here you are. She wasn't sure what point he was trying to make. Apparently he noticed. Opportunity matters. His eyes held hers. What people do with opportunity matters more. Amara looked down briefly. The salary still felt unreal. Finance approved this? Finance processed it. That answer made her suspicious immediately. She narrowed her eyes. You approved it. Min-jun almost smiled. Yes. And nobody questioned it? I'm the managing partner. That was a fair point. A frustratingly fair point. Amara exhaled. Thank you. The words sounded inadequate. They felt inadequate. Min-jun nodded once, then added something that caught her completely off guard. It came from my salary. She stared. What? My portion. The silence that followed lasted several seconds. Amara genuinely didn't know how to respond. Who did that? Who gave away that much money, especially to a paralegal, especially to someone who wasn't family, or even a close friend? Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. This time Min-jun looked away first, toward the city, toward anything but her. When he answered, his voice was quieter. Because someone did something similar for me once. Amara noticed the shift immediately. The change wasn't dramatic. Most people probably would have missed it. She didn't. Something about that memory hurt him. The room suddenly felt different, more personal, more dangerous. For a second, she considered asking more, then decided against it. Everyone had scars. Some just hid them better than others. She straightened. Thank you. This time she meant it. Deeply. Min-jun nodded, then glanced at the clock. As long as you're here, Amara frowned. As long as I'm here what? His expression became unexpectedly serious. So we're clear. She waited. You should take me to dinner. For the first time since entering the office, Amara genuinely thought she had misheard him. I'm sorry? Dinner. The word landed casually, far too casually. You. A small pause. Me. Another pause. Dinner. Amara stared. Min-jun remained completely straight-faced. The absurdity of the moment finally broke through her confusion. She laughed. A real laugh. Not polite, not professional, just genuine surprise. When she finally regained control, she pointed at him. You're joking. No. You're absolutely joking. I'm not. After giving me a bonus? Correct. And I'm paying? Correct. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense. She folded her arms. How? Min-jun raised an eyebrow. You receive money. Your money. You receive money. That doesn't answer the question. It answers enough. Despite herself, she found herself smiling. This conversation felt strangely normal, strangely easy, dangerously easy. Eventually she shook her head. Fine. Fine? Dinner. A pause. Tonight. For the first time, a genuine smile appeared on Min-jun's face. Brief, controlled, but real. Good. Amara immediately regretted agreeing. What have I just done? We'll find out. She laughed again, then pointed toward the door. Now get back to work. His smile widened slightly. You're in my office. Still. The response earned a quiet chuckle. A moment later, she left. The entire walk back to her office felt surreal. She kept replaying the conversation. Dinner. With Min-jun. Why did that sound so strange? More importantly, why didn't it sound entirely professional? By mid-afternoon, another surprise arrived. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Hello? Miss Okafor? Yes. We've been instructed to prepare you for this evening. Amara blinked. Prepare me? Yes. What does that mean? The woman on the other end sounded cheerful. It means we'll arrive shortly. The line disconnected. Amara stared at her phone, confused. 30 minutes later she understood, because 2 luxury vehicles pulled up outside her apartment, and several women stepped out carrying garment bags. The realization hit immediately. Min-jun. By the time evening arrived, she stood before a mirror, barely recognizing herself. The outfit blended elegance with pieces of her Nigerian heritage. Not a costume, not a statement. Something that felt like home and soul at the same time. For a long moment she simply looked at her reflection. Then another thought appeared. Why is he doing this? No answer came. Only uncertainty. The limousine ride felt shorter than expected. When the vehicle finally stopped, her pulse quickened. The driver opened the door. Cool evening air drifted inside. Amara stepped out and immediately saw him. Min-jun was already waiting outside the restaurant, one hand in his pocket, the other adjusting his cuff. The moment he saw her, he stopped moving. Not dramatically, not like a movie, just enough for her to notice. His eyes lingered. A second. 2. 3. Then he recovered. You look beautiful. The words were simple. The way he said them wasn't. Amara suddenly became aware of her heartbeat, of the distance between them, of the fact that neither seemed eager to close it. Then Min-jun extended his hand. A simple gesture. Nothing more. Yet neither of them treated it that way. Amara looked at the offered hand, then at him. Questions crowded her thoughts. Questions she couldn't answer. Questions she wasn't ready to answer. After a moment she placed her hand in his, and together they walked toward the restaurant. Neither realizing that somewhere else in Seoul, a woman named Han Seo-yeon had just received news that Kang Min-jun was having dinner with someone. And for the first time in years, something inside her shifted. The restaurant overlooked the Han River. Soft golden light reflected against the glass walls. Conversations drifted quietly between tables. Nothing about the place felt loud. Everything felt deliberate. Amara understood immediately why Min-jun had chosen it. Not because it was expensive, because it was private. They were escorted to a table near the windows. The city stretched beyond them in shimmering reflections. For a few moments, neither spoke. Menus rested untouched between them. Water glasses sat full. The silence wasn't awkward, it was cautious. 2 people trying to decide what kind of evening this actually was. Eventually, Min-jun broke first. He always did. What do you think? Amara glanced around. It's beautiful. You like it? I do. A small smile touched his face. Good. The waiter arrived. Orders were placed. Drinks came first, then silence returned. Amara looked at her outfit, then at the table, then back at Min-jun. No. His eyebrow lifted. No? I'm asking again. Asking what? Am I really paying for this? The question finally made him laugh. A real laugh. Not the short, restrained version she usually heard. The sound caught her completely off guard. What? You've asked that 4 times. Because this dress alone costs more than my monthly rent. And you're sitting in a restaurant that probably charges people for breathing. His shoulders shook slightly. For a man who carried himself so seriously, his laugh felt strangely young. You don't have to worry. That isn't an answer. It is tonight. She narrowed her eyes. You planned this. Perhaps. You definitely planned this. Perhaps. Amara pointed at him. I knew it. Min-jun took a sip of water, completely unbothered. The sight made her shake her head. Then her smile slowly faded. Because another question had appeared. One she couldn't ignore. Why me? The thought lingered. Eventually, Min-jun leaned forward slightly. Can I ask you something? Amara immediately became suspicious. You already are. His lips twitched. Fair point. Then his expression settled, more serious now. Tell me about yourself. The simplicity of the request surprised her. What do you want to know? Anything. She studied him carefully. Why? The question almost left her mouth. Instead, she looked out toward the river, gathering her thoughts. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. I grew up in Lagos. Min-jun listened, not pretending to listen. Actually listening. The difference mattered. My parents weren't wealthy. She smiled faintly. Not even close. A pause. But they believed education could change everything. The memories came easier than expected. I worked constantly. Another pause. Scholarships, internships, whatever I could get. Min-jun remained silent, giving her room, giving her time. I became a lawyer younger than most people expected. Pride entered her voice briefly, then disappeared. And for a while I thought I could fix things. Fix what? The system. The answer escaped before she could stop it. A hollow laugh followed. You sound like you already know how that story ends. I know how most stories like that end. Amara nodded. Then you know the rest. Tell me anyway. Something about the way he said it made refusal impossible. So she continued. She told him about courtrooms, clients, long nights, big victories, painful losses. She talked about ambition, about mistakes, about the case that destroyed everything. Not every detail. Just enough. When she finished, several minutes had passed. Their food had already arrived. Neither had touched it. Min-jun sat quietly, processing, not judging, processing. Finally he spoke. Do you regret it? The question hit harder than expected. Amara looked down, then back up. Every day. The honesty surprised even her. I regret what happened. A pause. But I don't regret caring. Min-jun held her gaze. That's an important distinction. She nodded. Most people don't think so. I'm not most people. No arrogance, just fact. The statement lingered between them. Eventually, Amara took a breath. Your turn. My turn? You know everything about me. Not everything. Enough. She pointed toward him. So now you talk. Min-jun looked toward the river. For a moment she thought he might refuse. Instead he spoke. Slowly, carefully. My parents died when I was young. The words landed quietly, yet their weight filled the space between them. Amara immediately understood something. This wasn't a story he told often, perhaps ever. I barely remember them. His voice remained steady, almost too steady. My grandmother raised me. A faint smile appeared. She wasn't wealthy either. Another pause. But she was stubborn. That earned a small laugh from Amara. Min-jun nodded. Very stubborn. The smile faded. I spent most of my childhood studying. Why? Because I wanted options. The answer arrived instantly, as if he'd carried it for years. I didn't want us worrying about rent. A pause. Food. Another. Medical bills. His eyes drifted toward the table. I wanted stability. Amara listened without interrupting. It took years. He laughed softly. More years than I expected. But eventually you got it. Eventually. The word sounded strange coming from him. Not triumphant, almost regretful. Then his expression changed, only slightly, yet enough for her to notice. Before everything became easier, he stopped. The silence stretched. Amara waited. My grandmother died. There it was, the wound, the one she'd sensed earlier. Min-jun stared through the window, not at the city, past it, as if looking somewhere only he could see. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter than before. After my grandmother died, I spent years feeling alone in rooms full of people. Amara felt something tighten inside her chest. The words sounded practiced. Not because they were rehearsed, because they'd been carried for a long time. She was the first person who understood that loneliness without me ever having to explain it. The moment the words left him, he seemed to realize something. Amara noticed immediately. He hadn't been talking about his grandmother anymore. He'd been talking about someone else, or perhaps comparing. Neither of them acknowledged it. Neither needed to, because they both understood. The realization settled between them, quiet, dangerous, human. For several seconds, neither spoke. Neither looked away. Neither wanted to be the first. Finally, Amara broke eye contact, not because she wanted to, because she needed to. Something about that moment felt too honest, too close, and honesty had consequences, especially in workplaces, especially between people like them. She took a slow breath, then forced a smile. I have a rule. Min-jun blinked. A rule? Yes. The atmosphere shifted immediately. The warmth cooled, not vanished, just cooled. Min-jun leaned back slightly, listening, waiting, and for the first time that evening, uncertainty entered his eyes. Min-jun remained still. A rule? Amara nodded. The warmth that had slowly built between them now felt fragile. One wrong sentence could change everything, and she wasn't ready for that. Not with school, not with work, not with her future balanced on a foundation that still felt unstable. I don't date people I work with. The words landed softly, yet they carried the weight of a door closing. For a moment, Min-jun simply looked at her. Not surprised, not offended, just quiet. Amara continued before she lost her nerve. I made that rule years ago. A pause. After seeing what happened to other people. She folded her hands together. Distractions become complications. Another pause. Complications become problems. Min-jun listened carefully. And problems become consequences. The river lights reflected across the glass behind him. For the first time all evening, neither seemed completely comfortable. Amara forced herself to continue. I worked too hard to get here. Her voice softened. I can't risk losing focus now. Min-jun looked down briefly, then nodded once. Slowly. I understand. The answer surprised her. No argument, no persuasion, no disappointment, just acceptance. Almost too much acceptance. She found herself wondering if she had misunderstood the entire evening. Then Min-jun spoke again. It's good to have rules. Relief washed through her, immediately followed by confusion. That was it? No emotional confrontation? No awkward conversation? Nothing? He took a sip of water, then looked at her. I have a similar rule. Amara blinked. You do? Yes? No relationships with employees. A short pause. Or partners. Something about the last word felt oddly specific. She noticed. He noticed her noticing. Neither commented. The tension dissolved slightly. Not completely. But enough. Amara laughed softly. So we've both been defending ourselves from a conversation neither of us was having. A rare smile appeared. Seems that way. The realization made both of them relax, at least on the surface. Beneath that surface, neither could entirely ignore what had almost happened, or what might have happened if she had never mentioned the rule. The rest of the dinner passed more easily. They talked about books, travel, languages, childhood memories, embarrassing university stories. For the first time, Amara saw pieces of Min-jun that never appeared inside the office. He wasn't cold. He wasn't distant. He was careful. There was a difference, a significant difference. By the time the evening ended, midnight had arrived. As expected, Min-jun drove her home. This time the silence felt different, comfortable, not empty. The kind of silence people share when words are no longer necessary. When they reached her apartment building, neither moved immediately. The engine remained running. Streetlights cast long shadows across the dashboard. Finally, Amara smiled. Thank you. For what? The dinner. Min-jun nodded. You're welcome. And for everything else? His expression softened. Then he looked away, almost as if accepting gratitude was harder than giving help. A few seconds later, she stepped out of the car. Neither realized that the friendship they had just defined so carefully would eventually become the very thing neither could control. The following year passed faster than either expected. Amara entered her second year of law school. Her grades improved. Her confidence improved. Her Korean improved. Everything seemed to move in the right direction. At the office, her reputation grew steadily. People trusted her work. Attorneys requested her assistance. New employees often assumed she was an associate rather than a paralegal. She didn't correct them unless necessary. Meanwhile, her professional relationship with Min-jun continued, carefully, deliberately. Every few months they met for dinner. Nothing romantic, nothing inappropriate, just two people maintaining a friendship they both pretended was simple. The problem was that simplicity often disappears when people care too much. Neither spoke about it, neither acknowledged it, but both felt it. The awareness lingered quietly between them, month after month. Then came the meeting that changed everything. The firm's annual financial review was usually routine, boring even. Senior partners gathered around a long conference table while accountants presented reports. Most years the outcome was predictable. This year wasn't. Amara wasn't inside the meeting, but rumors spread quickly. By lunchtime, entire departments were whispering. By evening, everyone knew. The firm had a problem, a serious one. Client numbers were declining. Future projections looked worse. If nothing changed, layoffs would eventually follow. Then restructuring. Then something far worse. The possibility hung over the office like a storm cloud. For the first time since joining the firm, Amara saw genuine concern on people's faces. Several days later, senior leadership identified a possible solution. A merger. Not with a giant corporation. Not with an international legal empire. A mid-sized but highly respected Seoul firm. Financially stable. Strong client base. Strong reputation. Strong leadership. That leadership belonged to Han Seo-yeon. The moment Min-jun heard the name, something inside him tightened. Because he already knew her. Years ago, they had attended the same university. Years ago, she had admired him. Years ago, he had chosen a different path. Now she sat across from him in a conference room, successful, confident, dangerously intelligent. Their eyes met as the merger discussions began. Both understood immediately that neither had forgotten the past. The negotiations lasted weeks. Every clause was examined, every condition debated, every risk evaluated. Eventually, an agreement emerged. The merger would proceed. 50-50 ownership, shared leadership, shared responsibilities. On paper, it seemed perfect. Then the final clause appeared, and the room went silent. Several senior partners exchanged uncertain looks. One attorney actually laughed because he thought it was a joke. It wasn't. The proposal required Min-jun and Seo-yeon to share a residence for 3 years as part of a public partnership initiative designed to symbolize trust and unity between the merged firms. The explanation sounded ridiculous, yet there it was, written clearly, legally enforceable. Amara first heard about it from office gossip. She dismissed it immediately. Then she learned it was real. The realization felt strangely personal, a reaction she didn't entirely understand, or perhaps didn't want to understand. Several days later, she walked into Min-jun's office carrying documents. The moment she saw him, she knew something was wrong. He sat staring at nothing, completely still. The documents suddenly felt unimportant. "Are you okay?" Min-jun looked up. For a second, he considered giving a professional answer. Then something unexpected happened. He told her the truth. And when he finished explaining the situation, Amara felt as though the room had become smaller. Much smaller. Because for the first time in 2 years, their friendship had encountered a problem neither preparation nor discipline could solve. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Amara stood near the desk, holding the documents she had come to deliver. Min-jun remained seated, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the office walls. The silence felt heavier than usual. Not uncomfortable, important. Finally, Amara placed the documents down. "So what's the real problem?" Min-jun looked up. "The company survives if I agree." A pause. "The company suffers if I don't." Amara nodded slowly. "And the living arrangement?" His jaw tightened. "I don't care about that." She knew immediately he was lying. Not completely. Just enough. Enough to hide what actually bothered him. "The company comes first," he said. The answer sounded rehearsed, like something he'd repeated to himself all week. Amara looked away briefly. Her chest felt strangely tight. Then she forced herself to smile. "If the company comes first, then you already know what to do." His eyes met hers. The smile became harder to maintain. "Save it." The words hurt more than she expected. "But," Min-jun started. She interrupted him. "No, save it." Another pause. "You built this place." Her voice softened. "So save it." For several seconds, he simply stared at her. Then he nodded. A month later, the merger became official. The firms combined. The company survived. Everyone celebrated. At least publicly. Privately, things became complicated. Much more complicated. Because living together changed nothing between Min-jun and Seo-yeon, and that became the problem. Seo-yeon expected proximity to become affection. It didn't. She cooked for him. He thanked her. She remembered his preferences. He appreciated it. She tried to create moments. He treated them as routines. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. Nothing grew. Every effort seemed to disappear into a wall she couldn't cross. The more she tried, the more obvious the truth became. Min-jun wasn't holding back because he was cautious. He was holding back because his heart simply wasn't there. One evening, she decided to stop pretending. The apartment was dark when Min-jun returned home. Candles illuminated the hallway. Soft music played somewhere in the background. The scent of expensive perfume filled the air. He followed the candlelight into the living room and stopped. Seo-yeon stood waiting. He saw what no man had ever seen. He saw her on a red silk lingerie that showed literally everything a man could ever wanted to see in a woman. The message was obvious, painfully obvious. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Min-jun quietly walked past her, turned on the lights, and looked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. "You should close the curtains." Seo-yeon stared. "What?" "The neighbors can see you from inside." The words landed like a slap, not because they were cruel, because they weren't. Because he wasn't even looking at her the way she wanted. That hurt more. "That's all you have to say?" Min-jun turned. Confusion crossed his face. Then realization. Then regret. The damage had already been done. Seo-yeon laughed. A broken laugh. The kind people make when they're seconds away from crying. "I don't understand." Her voice shook. "I've done everything." Min-jun remained silent. "I learned what you liked." Tears formed. I waited. Another breath. I tried. Finally he spoke, quietly, carefully. "Seo-yeon." "No." She pointed at him. "No." Her composure finally cracked. "Why not me?" The question echoed through the apartment. Raw, desperate, human. Min-jun closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, there was only honesty. "Because anything else would be cruel." "My heart isn't there." The word shattered what remained. Seo-yeon looked away, as if the truth itself had become unbearable. Then she asked the question she already knew the answer to. "Is it her?" Min-jun said nothing, and somehow that silence answered everything. Weeks later, Seo-yeon discovered something she wasn't supposed to find. Information from Amara's past. The case. The disciplinary ruling. The scandal that had destroyed her legal career. She spent days verifying it. Then weeks. And the more she learned, the more a dangerous idea formed. If she couldn't remove her feelings, perhaps she could remove the person causing them. The confrontation happened late on a Thursday night. Amara was alone in her office. The building was nearly empty. She heard the door open, looked up, and saw Seo-yeon. Without a word, a folder landed on her desk. Amara frowned, then opened it. The color immediately drained from her face. Every secret, every mistake, every detail. Right there, waiting. Her hands trembled. "How did you get this?" Seo-yeon remained standing, cold, controlled. "You have two choices." Amara couldn't speak. "Leave Seoul." The room spun. Or, Seo-yeon's eyes hardened. "Or everyone finds out." The threat lingered in the air long after she left. That night, Amara cried herself to sleep. Not because she feared embarrassment, because she feared losing everything again. The degree, the future, the identity she had spent years rebuilding. By Friday, she had made her decision. She would leave, start over. Again. The thought hollowed her out. She sat alone in her office staring at nothing. 4 hours passed. Then a shadow appeared at her door. She assumed it was Seo-yeon. It wasn't. Min-jun. He took one look at her face and immediately knew. "Tell me what's wrong." Just 4 words, yet something inside her broke. She told him everything. The blackmail, the threat, the fear, all of it. When she finished, Min-jun sat quietly. Then he said something she never expected. "I already know." Amara froze. "What?" "I know about your past." Her heartbeat stopped. "Then why?" The question barely came out. "Why did you hire me?" Min-jun leaned forward. His voice softened. "Because mistakes don't tell me who people are." A pause. "I watched what happened after." Another. "I watched what you became." Tears filled her eyes. Min-jun continued. "Most people fall and stay down." His gaze never left hers. "You stood back up." The tears finally escaped. For the first time in years, someone had seen the worst thing she'd ever done, and still believed she deserved a future. Minutes later, Min-jun walked directly into Seo-yeon's office. The confrontation lasted less than 10 minutes, but it changed everything, because that same night he discovered evidence hidden inside old merger records, creative accounting, manipulated reporting. A carefully disguised attempt to make her former firm appear stronger than it truly was. Enough evidence to destroy careers. Enough evidence to end the blackmail. The next morning, just as Amara prepared to leave Seoul, Min-jun arrived. "Don't go." She stared at him. "I found a way." Hours later, the truth exploded. Investigations followed. Resignations followed. Criminal charges followed. When everything settled, Seo-yeon was gone. The company survived. Barely. Months passed. Min-jun recovered from the injury he suffered during the final confrontation. Amara returned to school, returned to work, returned to building her future. One afternoon, he entered her office, closed the door, and sat down. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked nervous, genuinely nervous. I don't know how to say this. Amara smiled faintly. That's a first. So don't interrupt, she laughed. Okay. Min-jun took a breath, then another, and finally said everything he'd spent years refusing to say. Not perfectly, not elegantly, honestly. When he finished, silence filled the room. Amara felt tears gathering again. Not from sadness, from relief. Years of restraint, years of uncertainty, years of pretending. Finally spoken aloud. Then he asked her to marry him. Not because it was perfect, not because life was simple, but because they had already walked through the worst parts together and somehow remained. 2 months later, they married quietly. No spectacle, no headlines, just two people choosing each other. Years later, standing above the city that had nearly broken both of them, Amara found herself thinking about everything it had taken to reach that moment. The mistakes, the sacrifices, the loyalty, the betrayals, the love. And one question remained. A question neither time nor happiness could completely answer. Was it love that saved them? Or were they simply two lonely people who refused to let the other fall? If you've been with us from the very beginning to this moment, I want your honest thoughts. How did the story sit with you? And more importantly, if you were in that position, how would you truly feel? Drop your answer in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you enjoy stories where love collides with loyalty, betrayal cuts deep, and every choice carries weight, tap like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next story.